Hi Jamie, my name's Lewis, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well, Lewis. So mate, where did it all go wrong for you?
What do you mean, ended up in prison, yeah?
Yeah, ended up in prison.
I started going to prison at a young age. My first time I went into prison when I was 15 years old. Before that I was in the care of social services. So I was kind of living a chaotic lifestyle in a children's home and that. And yeah, I kind of just fell into a cycle of, committing crime, misusing substances, finding myself in prison and being in prison and wanting to sort myself out, but kind of just falling back into my old ways when I was released, So it's something that went on from like the age of 15 until I was 38, which was 2 years ago.
Big chunk of your life?
Yeah, a big chunk of my life, and so all my life I kind of I was kind of falling short, and not getting to where I wanted to be in life, but still trying to do it on my own. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was either too proud to ask for help, or I was too frightened to ask for help. And it took me a long time to get to that place where I realised I couldn't do it on my own.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I actually needed help from other people. Do you know what I mean? So, and when I came to that place where I could accept help, and I could let people in, because it's all right asking for help, but then the other side of it is accepting it as well. And so once I got to that place where I could accept help, then I got the opportunity to actually work with other people that wanted to help me. So what about yourself?
Alcohol addiction, really. Always led to violence. I got in a fight with 3 fellas when I was working at the West End pub. Went back with a knife, and true to say, if you carry a knife, you use it. Ended up murdering 2 fellas. Found out the next day they was dead. They did accept the fact that I didn't intend to set out to murder, but as I say, that's what happens when you carry a knife. I went into shock. Later that day I phoned up the police, handed myself in, pled guilty at the Old Bailey a year later, and the sentence was very lenient, life with a 15-year tariff. So, wow. 1997 to 2012. And then, obviously, as you know, in prison, you have gym, you have various distractions, and some people find faith in God. And that was kind of the turning point,
So did you find your faith early on in your prison sentence, or?
I think it was the first place I turned to was to go to the chapel, speak to a priest, just to say sorry. I felt someone was listening. I think that's when the journey began.
Me personally, I always found myself going to the chapel in prison, not necessarily always because I was seeking God, like I'd sometimes just go to meet my mates and that was on another wing. But I've always had a curiosity about God. I wouldn't admit that to anyone if you'd have asked me. I was the type of person that had mocked people that went to church, and it was more based around, I understand now, around fear of ridicule. Do you know what I mean? Like somebody maybe mocking me or taking a mickey out of me and that for believing in God and that, and because I the kind of people I grew up with, and that was their type of way of thinking. Do you know what I mean? It is like, you're stupid if you believed in God and all that type of stuff and that. And but yeah, so that was like a constant in my life as well. Like when I was in prison, I'd go to the chapel, and over the course of the time I was in and out of prison, there was times when I prayed sincerely, I think, do you know what I mean? Or I did try praying and that, but I don't think I hadn't got to that place where I was ready to accept defeat, do you know what I mean? And actually make that leap of faith. So, which is, kind of what happened to me the last time I was in prison.
Yeah, so it's quite powerful, isn't it? I tend to, same as yourself, I think I've been arrested, I've been charged, and I found myself in Wandsworth and they put me straight in the hospital, you know. And this guy walked in, and they said he was the Catholic chaplain. I said, "Hello, Father." He said, "Oh, I'm not a priest." I said, "Oh," he said, "My name's Michael." He said, "Oh, I'm a retired nurse and I volunteer with the chaplaincy." And that was the first person throughout 4 or 5 days who never judged me, just spoke to me as a normal person, even though I committed this atrocious crime. And I think that's the first time I met God. And I hadn't been to church. I come from an Irish Catholic background, and we used to go to Mass every week. But my parents divorced, and from the age of 16 through to, well, when I got nicked, really, I never saw the inside of a church apart from a funeral, you know. But then I started to go to the Mass once a week, and it was a very peaceful place. And in Wandsworth, the chapel there, it's the only place with no bars on the window. And there was a remarkable chaplaincy team there with a great group of volunteers, and they made a very, very difficult time a lot easier, you know, just by having someone to talk to, or feeling that you were supported. Much like, you know, all the various volunteers that go into prisons, including those who are committed and support and work through PACT to help, you know, people like
that's
you and
something
me
I
out.
realised, so like, where I said before, do you know what I mean, I've never accepted help or wasn't willing to accept, or wasn't in a position in myself to accept help from other people. And then, you know, like when I got to that point when I was in jail last time, and I did accept help, and I understand what you're talking about, because the chaplaincy team in Winchester Prison was amazing, you know what I mean? And they was really there for me, and, you know, they'd come on the wing to see me, and, you know, I'd go to the chapel to do various things and that, and they were just so supportive, you know. And one of the chaplains actually came to the church for my baptism, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Since I got out of prison and that, you know, and like you say, like completely non-judgmental, you know, and yeah, just really nice, kind people. And I feel like I probably missed out on that before, you know, where I've been so closed down in myself.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I've like missed that opportunity to get support. Do you know what I mean? From the church in prison, you know.
Yeah, I don't think I would have possibly made it if I'd have had that support, you know. I had a few friends along the way who committed suicide, or, you know, they overdosed inside. And sometimes during your darkest hour, just knowing, you know, that God's there watching over you. And there is somebody, you know, you can put in an app, or, you know, ask to see a chaplain, or you get a letter off a volunteer. There's a lovely lady there called Margot. I met her in Brixton. We carried on a correspondence for 10 years when I was in the various nicks all over the country, you know. And it was nice just to get a letter or a Christmas card, you know. So
what I'd be interested to know is, like, did, you know, like having your faith, how did it get you? Because I've got my own experience, of how once I came to faith, and I saw God was working in my life, like, it changed my experience in prison. Like for me personally, I got to the point where I felt like it melted the bars.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I don't know whether you had that same experience or not, but
there's certainly a great deal of liberation to that, you know. But I think it's, as you say, knowing that God's in your heart, He's part of your life, He's watching over you, yours, and He's in all things, behind all things. You know, whatever happens for a reason, then God has a plan, you know, whether it was a good day or a bad day. So it made me stronger.
Yeah.
Made me stronger. I could deal with anything that prison life threw at me.
Because I don't know about you, like so me personally, like I've suffered from addiction problems in my life, like with cocaine and heroin. So when I was in prison, I came into contact with a program called Cocaine Anonymous, and they've got like a 12-step program that you work through, like with a sponsor, somebody who's already gone through the steps. All my life I'd kind of been in this defeated place, where I thought that I was just a bad person, I was a bad apple, do you know what I mean? And I was just going to be like that for the rest of my life. And then I came into this contact with this program, you know, and I'd already been praying. I was trying to talk to this guy on the wing, that had some addiction problems, and I was telling him about the Cocaine Anonymous program, and I was telling him, you know, that I'd been through this process where I'd identified the people I'd harmed in my life. I'd been given a list of my character defects, and I was praying for them to be removed on a daily basis. And I was, for the first time in my life, I was actually not just wanting to be a good person, I was trying to be a good person on a daily basis throughout my day, which is a very challenging thing in prison. You know that, innit, yeah? Like, there's a lot of people you're going to come into contact with on a daily basis, you can have conflict with, innit, you know? And I was talking to this guy about this program, and he actually opened up and said that he was a lapsed Christian, and he said a lot of stuff you're talking about, Lewis, is actually in the book of James in the New Testament. And so he said, have a read of it. He said, it's only 5 pages, you know. So, and I read the book of James, and it blew me away, because there was me like thinking, you know, trying my best to be a good person for the first time in my life, but actually having the tools to do it through prayer. And then I read about this high level of morality in the book of James about, you know, praising God in one tongue, you know, and then in one breath, and then in the next slandering someone. Do you know what I mean? Or gossiping and things like that. And I thought, wow, do you know what I mean? At first it set me back. I thought, how can I ever get to that? Do you know what I mean? But then I realised it was it's like progress, not perfection. Do you know what I mean? And so that really helped me, you know, because I'd read the Bible and pray around. I started praying around the people that I had resentments towards and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? And it kind of became freeing. Do you know what I mean? I started to be able to let go of things, as opposed to before, you know, sitting there in resentment and thinking, you know, like, I want to get revenge and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? So that's why I was asking you about, you know, your kind of faith and how it worked for you within being in prison. Do you know what I mean?
Gradual process, I suppose. And it was years to try and understand that Christ died on the cross to forgive my sins. I had 3 years on a therapeutic community where they break you down, and eventually I was sitting in a room with 7 other fellas, and I just started to cry and said, if this is what I've done, how can I possibly live with myself, you know? And then began the journey of building myself up. And I reached a point where I was praying the Divine Office I was praying seven times a day, my rosary. Really intense relationship with God. Since I've been out, I've found that relationship is always wanting from my end. And sometimes a morning prayer can be walking around the park with the dog, morning God, here we go again. Bless Father Frank, my loved ones, and I'll try and do my best today, you know. Prayer's a conversation, but if you've got God in your heart, and whether it's just good morning God, good night God. But what also helped was the example of, you know, the priests, the chaplaincy, the nuns, the volunteers, the pack workers, because it's faith in action. You know, it's not just saying, well, I've got faith. It's actually putting that faith to use for God's purposes in whatever vocation you're called to do. And with PACT, it's a prison vocation, you know, inside and outside. So
it's interesting you say that, because in the book of James it says faith without works is dead. Do you know what I mean? And that really stood out to me. So you know, that was something that really spoke to me when I was reading that. So and that's my understanding of it. Do you know what I mean? It's, you know, like somebody said to me, they said, if you're trying to build a friendship with someone, or a relationship with someone, you know, you don't just say hello to them as you're backing out the drive in your car in the morning. Do you know what I mean? Go, all right, mate. You know what I mean? And it's like, you know, you can't build a relationship with God, you know, if you don't speak to him. Do you know what I mean?
Very true.
You know, it's true, isn't it? And I really relate to what you said about that, you know, about feeling like it's wanting. Because in prison, I had all this time. You know, at first, I'll be honest, praying was mechanical for me, I felt very conscious of it, and I used to cover my observation panel on my door, because I was worried that someone was going to look through, you know, and see me praying. I still had that fear, but then, you know, like when I got to the point where I realised that I had clear evidence of God working in my life, and I'd got to that place where I felt free, and I kind of started thinking to myself, do you know what, I need to start telling people about this, And I prayed, you know, for the courage to talk about Jesus Christ and talk about God in front of the other lads on the wing. Do you know what I mean? And I did. I started speaking out about it and that. And nothing bad happened to me, do you know what I mean? And I've got confidence in that.
Yeah.
And then I kind of went from, like I say, mechanically praying to then praying at lunchtime, and then it gradually got to, like you say, where it's just a conversation, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I wake up in the morning and I say, good morning, God. Do you know what I mean?
That's the one, night God.
Yeah.
But I've never got, when I've started that conversation, I've never ever felt, oh, not you again, what do you want? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's quite powerful, it's very powerful, my brain.
Yeah, and I found that, so like when you got more time to pray in prison, I got to the point where, you know, I started to realise about the power of prayer, and I started praying for my purpose in life, yeah, and I'd pray every day for someone to be sent for me to help. I became a listener in prison through the Samaritans and that, and so I used to be on call for people who was maybe feeling suicidal and stuff like that, but so I used to pray every day for God to send someone for me to help, and yeah, I know what you mean. Like, I got to that point where I felt like I was in conscious contact with God. You know what I mean? I could feel Him in my life, and I do miss that at certain points since I've got out of prison now. I feel like life takes over a bit, you know, like work or whatever you're doing and that, and it's remembering that and then trying to build the prayer back into your day. You know what I mean? Regularly. I mean, I can be driving down the road. I mean, me personally, I got to the place in my life where I was homeless and living in a car park, yeah, due to my addiction. Do you know what I mean? And, you know, like today, I've got my own business and I've got 2 teams of people working for me. And I'll be driving down the road, yeah, going to an appointment with a customer, stuck in traffic.
Yeah.
And I'll be sat there and I'm having a pity party. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, I'm like, you know, and then I have that light bulb moment, yeah. And I remember where I come from, do you know what I mean? And I'll stop and I'll go, thank you, God. Do you know what I mean? Thank you for releasing me from that hopeless way of life. And I say that a lot, do you know what I mean? Yeah, I have that moment of realisation.
I think I'd agree with you on that. And again, as you said, you can't do it by yourself. Mm-hmm. We all need help. And, you know, I would say for those people that are out there that are thinking about it, get involved. I mean, I've been back to the Mount a couple of times, and I've gone into the chapel and I've spoken to the lads about faith and faith journey. I've said to them, look, I've committed murder. I can't undo that. But whatever you've done, you can apologise. You can stop, you know, but it's only going to come through Christ in your heart, God working in your life, and the help of other people. It's the only way, you know. Otherwise, as you say, you just go round in circles.
Yeah.
All you do is create pain, anguish, you hurt yourself, you hurt others, and you go nowhere in life. My initial experience was quite unique because as opposed to being released to a hostel, I went into a vocations discernment community with the Augustinians in Hammersmith, and a great deal of support there. And obviously I had to go see them prior to being released. I was given a day's leave to go up and visit to see how they feel about living with a convicted murderer on a life licence, you know, and they were all welcoming, all non-judgmental, and I became part of a very tight, close Catholic community, again with the Augustinian brothers. I eventually found my own vocation, and I came away, I moved somewhere else, and to walk into a church and just be greeted by somebody. I think the first time I walked into a church, I sat down and somebody walked up and said, "That's my seat." You know, and you think, wow, where am I? What happened to hello, you're new? So just to be made to feel welcome, but also in that context of not being an outsider. Oh, that's the ex-prisoner, you know? And for some people it's a talking point, for others a bit of gossip, for others it's can be quite frightening, you know? But it's definitely un-Christian. With Father Frank, who I've mentioned before, is a prison chaplain of over 30 years. Because he works with an open prison, he has prisoners, serving prisoners, working in his parish. And it's the only church I've ever felt completely welcome, where I'm just Jamie. And all those parishioners know about my past. You know, I was serving in the prison when I was doing community work with him, working in his parish, and I am always made to feel warm, welcome, and part of that Christian. It's a family, you know. And nobody ever said to me in Father Frank's church, you're sitting in my chair. There are places where the love of God just flows, you know, and the presence of God is there. And in other communities, it's lacking. Whether that's something that people do because, you know, they go to church because they go to church, or they do what they do within the church to be seen to be doing that, you know. But yeah, just to be greeted, really. You know, you're coming from one institution, which is a very violent place that you survive. You want to walk into a church and be made to feel welcome, where you can love and be loved, you know, and share fellowship and the love of Christ.
Okay, so when I was released from prison, I had this experience. I was thinking about going to church, but I wasn't sure about which church I wanted to go to. And I was walking back from the shop, and there was a book on top of a post box. And I was really drawn to this book. And I went over and I picked it up, and it was a first person like narrative. Someone had written it as if it was Jesus talking about his life. It was, the first like few pages had been ripped out, but the bit that Jesus was speaking in the book, he was talking about coming out of the wilderness and getting baptized and that by John the Baptist, yeah. And so anyway, I read that before I went to bed, and then I got up in the morning and I walked into Southampton city centre, and literally as I walked onto the high street, there was a lady preaching in the street, yeah. And as I walked by her, she was talking about Jesus coming out of the wilderness, and I thought, wow, there's no coincidence going on here, yeah, like this, do you know what I mean, yeah, this is God, yeah. And I kind of sat down, and I called her over when she paused, and I got speaking to her, and I told her my situation and what happened, and she said, I'm an evangelist, Lewis. She said, I'm preaching today to bring people to church. And so what she actually did is she took me to three different churches, to help me find a church that was right for me. And I'll be honest, so I went to one church and I found it a little bit stuffy. You know, it didn't seem like there was a lot going on there. And then I kind of went to the church that I go to now. Yeah, I just felt welcome there. I went there, and immediately I had people coming up to me and, you know, asking me who I was, and, you know, and getting my number and things like that. In my opinion, they're very non-judgmental. You know, I've been very open about my past and that, you know, and what's happened in my life. And not once has anyone made me feel uncomfortable about that. And even to the point where, you know, they've embraced me. You know, I've got up on stage and I've shared my testimony in church and that. So yeah, I feel like I have been welcomed into the church community, 100%. So had you been to prison before you went, and was it anything like you thought it was going to be if you hadn't?
The first time I went to prison I was 24, and I threatened to shoot a fella. And I found myself, I'd never broken the law before, I found myself in Wandsworth prison, banged up 23 hours a day with a complete stranger, one electric light bulb, there was no television or radio, and a bucket to use, which you emptied in the morning, slopping out. And it was quite a frightening place, to be honest with you. I just remember being completely isolated from everyone, everything I knew, my life, you know, stripped down,
yeah,
shouted at, given a number, and it was quite dehumanising, you know. It took me, I did 2 years there, and I say it took me 2 years to recover from that experience, you know. Plus the shame of the fact that I'd been to prison in the first place, but I just remember all the time being wired, completely aware of, or having to be, because you never knew you could say the wrong word to somebody in the morning and end up, you know, in trouble that night. You know, as you know, prison is a place full of people with various issues, and a small spark can kick off into a big fire, you know, and you survive it on a daily basis.
Yeah, but so my experience of prison is like, so I first went to prison in 1996, yeah, so they were just starting to put plug sockets in the cells. You know, there wasn't any TVs and things like that. And like you say, you know, that was in the new prisons, they were putting the plug sockets in. Like most of the jails I've been to, and that they're old Victorian jails, like you say, yeah, they're like very forbidding places, you know, when you walk in there, they are, I think they were designed to be like that, weren't they? Do you know what I mean? Yeah, to make you feel like that when you go in there. But I had exactly the same experience, you know, where it was just 23 hours a day in your cell and that, and you'd get out for exercise. And part of the regime used to be getting out of cell for a shower back in the day, do you know what I mean? And then slowly I've seen over the years, you know, they've like, you know, they've introduced TVs and things like that, and PlayStations and things like that into the prisons, which are only for people who are supposedly behaving themselves and everything. But for me personally, I've always felt like it doesn't matter what you give me when I'm in prison, you know, I'm still in prison.
Yeah.
And I'm still stuck there, and I'm still stuck inside my own head. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, dealing with myself, and then, like you say, on top of that, dealing with every other Tom, Dick and Harry that's got all his problems as well.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And literally, you go down to get your dinner, you bump into someone in a dinner queue. That guy's just been on the phone to his girlfriend, and his girlfriend's told him she don't want to be with him no more. You bump into him, and you get a metal tray round your head or something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the reality of prison. Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of dodging that on a daily basis. Yeah, I mean, I got to the point, I don't know about you, how long it took you to become acclimatised, but I went from hating prison to finding my way in there, and then ultimately getting to the point where, you know, I just accepted that was my life, you know what I mean? And it was almost comfortable for me because, you know, my life was so chaotic on the outside that going into prison, yeah, and just having this bit of normality, yeah. Like 3 meals a day and a bed to sleep in, do you know what I mean? Was like, you know, it became a little bit of a sanctuary for me, do you know what I mean? When my door was shut and I didn't have to deal with everyone else.
When you're banged up, yeah.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? But for people who say that prison's easy, do you know what I mean? I've had first-hand experience, and a lot of people struggle to cope with prison, do you know what I mean? And it's all that hard exterior, do you know what I mean? Yeah. And not showing how you're feeling, do you know what I mean? And pretending that everything's all right, do you know what I mean, when it isn't, you know? And I suppose where people are acting like that on the outside and holding it all in, you know, it gets to that boiling point, do you know what I mean? And I think, and people explode. It's hard to break that culture in prison, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? It's like that macho image type of thing, do you know what I mean? And once I accepted help, I found that there's actually a lot of help in prison, you know what I mean? People actually want to help you because they want to help you, not for any other reason, innit? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I reached a point where I was institutionalised, and then when it did come to release, I was petrified of the world. Because again, I was used to a set routine, and the world was a very, very scary place. When I did come out and I had to go somewhere, I went straight to that place and I came straight back again. It took a year to find some sort of normality and feel that I was okay. Mm-hmm. And again, I had some great probation officers for those first couple of years, and various other volunteers. My father, Frank, who's a remarkable chaplain of 30 odd years. So I had a nice support network there. But in terms of, as you say, being inside, I was actually in Brixton, and they'd done a fundraiser, and a load of celebrities come in and stay over on C Wing to raise money to put into the prison and what have you. And there were a few magistrates there, and what they'd done was they locked them up at 5 o'clock in the evening after they had their meal. They let them out again at 8 o'clock in the morning. And there was a few magistrates actually said they had no idea, you know, because with all the shouting through the windows and what's going on and all that. And they actually turned around and said they'd seriously reconsider where a custodial sentence might be needed, you know, because of the impact of that one night.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. But it's definitely not holiday camping now,
No,
you know.
no.
It's,
One thing you spoke about
you survive
there,
it. You survive prison, you don't.
Yeah, no, I completely identify with that. One thing you spoke about there, what I was thinking about was you said you had like a big support network in prison, yeah? And I kind of identified with that, you know, that I had all these people in prison, yeah, that was helping me from different agencies. And something that I really struggled with was that they all told me that they weren't allowed to have any contact with me once I was released from the prison. Which I think is ridiculous, if I'm honest, do you know what I mean? And because I've formed some really strong relationships with some of them support workers in there. Now, like I say, I've been supported by Pact, yeah, my support worker since I got out of prison and he's helped me massively, do you know what I mean? But I understand why they put them things in place, do you know what I mean, for the security of the prison, but I think there could be, you could take a look at that, you know what I mean, that, you know, if you've built this rapport with someone in prison that's helped you, and then you're released and then you're not allowed to speak to them. Do you know what I mean? It's just, it seems to me, doesn't make much sense.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't know, maybe I think that's something that could be looked at.
Definitely needs addressed. My experience was that I had a prison chaplain there of 3 years when I was in a CCAT, told you that, and I said to the chaplain, you know what, miss, when I get out, I'll buy you a cup of tea. 3 years later, I wrote her a letter and said, look, I'm out. Would you like a cup of tea? We met in London with her boss, who was the coordinating chaplain, and we had a cup. It meant the world to me, absolutely meant the world. And we're now 10 years down the line. I've been out, and we meet up twice a year for a cup of tea, go to a museum or a play, and just catch up, you know. And you're right, that rule somewhere along the line needs to be omitted, or you know, it needs to be looked at. But thankfully, even though you've got to adjust from the support that you've got inside, you've got all that support network outside. But it's down to the individual. If you don't take that on or reach out, then you can't be helped, can you?
I think it's, the other point of view though is if you find it hard to open up and trust people, do you know what I mean? And then you finally got to that point where you've opened up to someone in prison, do you know what I mean? And then you meet this new person when you get out of prison, and then you've got to start that whole process again, do you know what I mean? I can see it can be quite difficult, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I kind of got used to it, because over the 8 years reporting on a life licence, I had something like 32 probation officers.
Wow.
And every time they wanted to hear the story, you know?
Yeah.
So it's not a case of, the way I feel about the murders I committed, and, you know, how I've learned to live with myself and the pain that I've caused everybody else, but it can become mechanical to sit there and go, well, my name's Jamie and blah, 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 blah. And then 3 weeks later, I'll be leaving and somebody else new is coming. You know, it's, so I kind of got used to that aspect, really. But then again, for myself, I still continued. I have great friends that were my peer support when I came out, who remain friends. And after the first 3-4 years, probation was just something that I had to go through. Yeah. How are you? What are you doing? Yes, thank you very much. See you in a couple of weeks. You know, it was something that was put in place, but of no support at all. But I still have great friends that I can call up, you know, how are you? What are you doing? And it's not just about me, it's about them as well. It's a two-way conversation, you know. I think God kind of makes these introductions as well. You know, I can't imagine my life without my friend, the chaplain. What a wonderful, remarkable person. And we was introduced in the nick, you know. She knocked on the door and said, hello, I'm so-and-so. How are you? Can I help you? Would you like to talk to me, you know? And you think, wow.
Now you're friends today.
Still friends to this day.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, certainly is.